Welcome to the Sound Meets Sound podcast. I'm your host, Meg Ann Wilhoit, and my guest this episode is Holly Roadfeldt, who's here to talk about her album Hommages, in which she performs a series of compositions by Anthony Joseph Lanman. Welcome to the Sound Meets Sound podcast, Holly Roadfeldt. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
And we're here to talk about Hommages. I was listening to that this morning, and it's amazing. The first thing that hit me when I was listening to the album is just the sheer amount of those 15 pieces that you recorded. So how long did the recording process take for those?
Well, we were doing them in installments, mostly because when we started to record, Tony hadn't written some of them yet. So we kind of did them, I'm trying to even remember, maybe 3 sessions, because there were months in between. The last ones that he did were the homage to Neil Peart, to Nadia Boulanger, and to Gary Gygax. So those are the last 3. The first homage that he wrote was to Eddie Van Halen, and that would have been in 2016, I believe. And I guess I should have looked that one up because now it's been such a long process.
2016 was a while ago.
And it wasn't the first one I performed, but it was the first one that was written. And then we're to 2024, I guess, was the last one that he gave me. So this was the whole procedure. I love how I gesticulate.
She's using her hands very expressively, everyone.
What was also interesting is that the first 5 he wrote a long time ago, so I wasn't familiar with that. But then the last 10 were written for me in mind.
Have you performed all of them, or are you planning to perform them all?
I have performed, yes. I had to think about that really quickly. Yes, I have performed all of them. I've only performed Gygax, Peart, and Boulanger once, but I did that in November. So Eddie Van Halen, I don't know, we're upwards to 35, 40 times.
Wow.
Because that's one that easily goes anywhere. And that's what I love about this collection is that there's so many different ways to mix and match, not only with the sets for Tony's music, but also the fact that you can have a set alongside Chopin or Rachmaninoff or Beethoven or whatever. It really doesn't matter. It's that really good friend that you can take anywhere. I don't have that many collections of pieces that really can go anywhere in a new music concert, for whatever audience, for an academic setting, for a church.
It's a testament to the composer because it's a wide variety of types of pieces, or I should say a wide variety of like sonic environments, but there is a cohesiveness to them that they sound like they all go together. When I was listening to it didn't sound like this herky-jerky kind of thing. It was very cohesive. I'm sure some of that is obviously down to you. The other thing that hit me when I was listening to it this morning was the imagery, like that was coming up for almost all of them. I think I was either seeing the person that was being homaged or just this other images coming up in my head. I guess this is also just sort of about your process. Like, is that imagery there for you, or is like what is happening for you do you see images when you play music, or are you is your brain working in a different way?
I think it depends on the homage, and I think again, if this was a visual you would be able to see, there's a smirk that I get when I play an homage to Eddie Van Halen or Neil Peart because classical pianists are just not supposed to be that cool. And so there's definitely a swagger, and whenever I play Van Halen, it's like I take on a different persona. And so, there's a little bit of imagery. I mean, I love to play the piece. And so the piece is really easy to just play. But at the same time, when you are, when a classical pianist is trying to sell Eddie Van Halen, you gotta have an image. I do get into kind of a trance when I play Bingen. I don't know how else to say it, but there's a click now. Even my voice has changed, and when I'm thinking about it, there is something that I need to be in that different space. It's more reverent. There are a couple of other ones. Zappa also had a different feel, and of course that one wasn't written for me. I mean, I feel like I almost need to have a rock and roll set, you know? That just has its own group, which I have not done yet, but I was thinking about it. I guess, yes, it depends on the piece, but there is a different personality, a different persona, a different place, space for each one, whether that's an image or a feeling or a sound world. That's how it would work.
Right. Yeah. Something physical going on with you yeah. And that's what I've always loved about your playing is I just feel your whole being in the playing. So, and I had one question about the Hayao Miyazaki. Is there some kind of prepared piano or what was the?
Oh, that's the metronome.
That's the metronome. Okay.
Yes. Actually, this is wild. I'm glad you asked about this. So at the beginning of this track, you hear me winding up the metronome. That's what that is.
That's what that is.
And so it's one of those old-fashioned metronomes that clicks back and forth. So when I play this live, this is I played it one place that was a very intimate setting. So the metronome was very loud. And when they were talking about it, is there really a metronome in that? Yeah. Is it really marked in the score? Yes. Well, where's it marked in the score? You can look right here. And what I love about that one so much is that I had never seen a Miyazaki film before. Tony introduced me to a lot of artists and philosophies that I just wasn't aware of. I mean, I knew some,
right,
but not all. And Miyazaki, that was a hole in my education. So then when I got to know a little bit of that man versus nature and then being able to play against that metronome, it really, really worked.
Yeah.
And the first time I played it actually with my Dr. Beat, and it just didn't have the same effect. And so now when I play it, I bring out
the wooden
triangular, whatever. The ones that, for most listeners now, they have no idea what it looks like, but people who are over the age of 40 know what it looks like. Or their grandparents have it. Like that,
I think I have one downstairs. Yeah. Very mechanical.
Yes.
This is just going to sound like a really dumb question. But as someone who, I play the piano and I studied, for quite a long time. And occasionally people paid me to play piano. But I'm not a concertizing pianist. I've never memorized so much music to perform. Well, that's a question. Did you memorize all these pieces to record, or have you ever recorded off of iPad or anything?
Generally, when I record, I do 2 takes. Well, I do more than 2 takes. But I have a memorized version. And then I have an iPad version. So, yeah, I feel like I'm not ready to record unless I have it from memory. But I did not play, when you asked about if I performed these, when I play them in concerts, sometimes I will use the iPad just because I think about it in how to present Tony's work the best. And when I played almost all of his Hommages in Chicago, this was September, over a year ago. So in that particular case, I had the iPad and I did it. But generally, I like to play him from memory. So Van Halen, I play from memory. Bingen, I play from memory. Gary Gygax isn't there yet because it's very minimal, and but I've gone through the process of doing it. But there's something very freeing about playing it from.
I could definitely see that. Especially for recording, that to get everything you want in it, to not have the visual distraction part of it. That wasn't such a dumb question, but I did have a dumb question. It's sort of I guess, yeah, I mean, maybe the dumb question is, like, how do you and you said you did this in 3 recording sessions,
Mhm.
right? How do you prepare as a pianist? Like, what goes into the preparation? Because there's such a different vibe than, like, if you're with an audience or with yourself or with a microphone. There's just something about having a camera or a microphone there that, for me, it's almost like a completely different thing because of how I'm reacting. With the audience, for me, it's a little easier because you're reacting to them and they're reacting to you, and there's more of a dialogue going there. And with the camera or the microphone, it's like, oh, this is being documented, for and preserved. So does that affect your preparations, or do you think about it that way, or are you just like, I'm playing and that's what's happening?
Well, that's not a dumb question. In fact, I think that's a very intelligent question, and it's part of something that I'm still working on. I have recorded a number of things that have gone to composers, and I think there is a difference. Since I'm opening up this door, there's a difference to how I play the first time for a premiere. And then after I have the premiere, maybe that's a little bit more, let me try to get everything that is on the page as much as I can. And then the second and third, fourth times, I start to relax a little bit. And so I'm going to even get farther off topic for a moment further. Because the first thing that I think of when I'm learning a piece is this a one-time shot? Is this a 5-time shot? Is this something I'm going to record? Because the preparation is different every single time. And I used to do a lot of premieres where it was just, I do it once and then it's over. And I didn't like that feeling. I hated that. And so then I started to really focus on pieces and people that I wanted to work with multiple times. And so once I started doing that, I noticed that the composers that started to write for me, they kept coming back because they knew I was committed, they were committed, and we started to build a relationship. And then that relationship became the relationship with the music. So when I'm recording, I'm trying to stay true to the composer, but also stay true to myself. And there is something of, I don't want to do multiple takes. I really am no more than a 3-take person because then it starts to go away. And so I think that intensity is really, really important. And I think that when you are preparing that way, that hypersensitivity to sound is essential. Now, with all that said, I can't do it without a really fabulous recording engineer. And Andreas Meyer helps me out immensely. I've worked with him on the last few albums, and I told Tony that he had to have Andreas do this. And Andreas is the sort of person where I can trust him completely. And so he will say, hey, why don't you try it this time doing X? So we'll have a couple of full takes. And then he says, okay, well, now let's piece together and let's have some fun with this. Can you bring out the bass, or can you add a little bit more pedal, or what do you think about such and so? And I trust his ears. Now, he also makes me feel incredibly comfortable. And if I hadn't had that experience, it just wouldn't be the same. And the other thing is, the first time, he was the one who did the Preludes project. So that was the first time that I worked with him. And unfortunately, my husband right away said, oh, so you work with Hilary Hahn, and that totally put me in a state of, oh my God, I can't do this, whatever. And so I can't think about those things.
Yeah.
But what I can think about are his ears and just trusting him. So yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
At least it is for me.
I never thought about that for a classical piano recording, that he would be listening and having these sort of these editorial thoughts for you of like, because I totally know what you mean about, having a recording engineer that you can trust and that really listens to what you're doing and actually has some really interesting ideas. That's wow. I knew that I think we talked about him in the last interview with the Preludes. But yeah, I hadn't thought about what a critical role in your comfort that that a recording engineer could play. Yeah, I love that approach to working with composers. That makes so much sense, to invest your artistic energy in things that you know you want to nurture and see how they live, performance to performance. That's really cool. And yeah, so in terms of preparing for this recording session, you had premiered and played some of them multiple times. Were there ones that I think you said there was just the one that you hadn't performed before you recorded it, or have you had performed all of them before you recorded?
No, the last 3 I recorded first and then performed them afterward, just because of when I received the scores and what our timeline was. And that was kind of a weird feeling, honestly. But everything worked out again because of the relationship that I had with Andreas. And one other thing that I just wanted to add about that relationship with a recording engineer: when you're a pianist, you have to adapt. You have to adapt to the personalities that you're working with.
Right.
So if you're playing with a singer, or you're playing with instrumentalists, or multiple instrumentalists, or whatever, you find that you have to adapt your personality so that everybody feels comfortable. It's that rule that I've learned to do.
Mm-hmm.
Recording engineer is the same thing. So when I recorded chamber music with Andreas, I noticed that he took the personality of the majority. And sometimes that was a little bit more exuberant, a little bit sillier. But I noticed that with him. I was like, who is this person? He's the same person that I'm used to dealing with. I'm a little bit more stoic. When I am going in to record, I am super serious.
Locked in.
Yeah. I laugh a lot normally when I'm talking with people, but not then. I'm really, really focused. And I think that also helps, just to know that somebody's on your side.
This is becoming a commercial for Andreas Meyer. Get you his phone number.
Well, the album is being released by Meyer Media, so this is also this is an important part. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's an apt commercial for Meyer Media, right? So it's being released June 10th. So are you planning? You've got the premiere. Are you planning any the release of the album? Are you planning any sort of performances around that or anything?
Not at this point, just because of where it's landing. We were thinking about it, but we had done a number of concerts with all these homages, and they will come back again. Mm-hmm. My next recording project is called North American Narratives, and so his music also seems to kind of fit in that, and so I'm going to be doing multiple concerts with that. So of course there'll be plenty of mentions of this album.
Right. Right, yes.
We're going ahead, yeah.
It'll get its attention. I do want to talk to you about just the concertizing pianist's life and what your plans are. I know I saw on social media you were talking about, your plans for working with different people and things like that. And yeah, I guess I'm just curious, like, how do you approach putting concerts together, and what are your plans for the future with all that? If you're comfortable talking about that, you obviously don't need to. But
no, I love this question. Right now, I am a work in progress, but here's the reason why I'm a work in progress. I'm a Generation Xer, and I am finding that I literally am either 10 years too early or 10 years too late. Mm-hmm. And my approach to music making is very different than how I learned in school, learned in conservatories. And it's not enough. None of this is enough. And the latest project that I did, I was the Pesky Artist in Residence through Lafayette College, and Alan Pesky provided this. I realized I didn't want to just be the performer. So I hired a visual artist, I hired a poet, I hired dancers, I commissioned pieces by composers, and everything had to be an event that was more than just a pianist on stage. Now, with that said, I would prefer just seeing a pianist on stage to just seeing something on YouTube or hearing something on Spotify. And right now, I feel completely that we are craving, whether everybody knows it or not, that live music performance that we had taken for granted for so many years before the pandemic. But now people are too comfortable just picking something up and looking at it on YouTube. And we really need to do that. But we aren't quite equipped for that concert experience. So I like the fact that I want to perform with a poet. I like the fact that I want to show visual art. And it's more than just the chamber music, but really knowing what that inspiration is. And so I did this concert, foreground, background, foreground, which is also another title for groups of concerts that I want to do. And I'm putting together a collective of artists that's not just your Perel ensemble, but actually including a poet. And Jessica Suchan, who was part of my foreground project, she said, yes, of course I'm in, which I love. So thank you, Jessica. Hopefully she'll be listening to. But this is one of those things that I feel, for me, has to be the next step. I have to think in a larger scale, and I have to include more people, and I have to be one-on-one. And I love teaching, but I feel that my experiences now has to be larger than what I've done. So I guess I'm very ambitious at the moment and very terrified, but very ambitious.
I want to clap, but it would make my microphone unhappy, so I'm silently clapping. I totally feel I feel that it's time for you to do something bigger. I've always felt that about you. It's like Holly really belongs on the stage just all the time. Like everyone should be hearing her.
And please attend these concerts. And I think that's the other part that we are lacking. That we all want to do this, and we all accept the fact that this is so needed. But then we really have to make sure we're committed as listeners to support other artists.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's where it gets a little tricky because, yes, we're all busy. Yes, we have some things. Maybe we're just completely exhausted. But pounding the pavement, know this. Everybody knows this from their own experiences. Trying to get people to go to a concert, and you're asking them, and you're putting yourself out there over and over and over again. To hear all the excuses, part of it is really, really demoralizing. Please don't do that. And I mean, we don't have the same dating roles. We don't have the same performing roles. It's very sad that we're competing against our phones, competing against things that aren't really going to smile at you in the same way. Just like, I'm so glad we're doing this interview. It's not that we can't do it someplace else. We're reading each other differently being face to face.
Yeah, and I really fell into that trap when I switched to the 9 to 5 rigmarole of like, oh, I'm too tired after work to go to a concert. And yet when I did go to the concert, I never regretted it. I was always like, oh, this was so edifying and nurturing and great. And I think it's, just this mindset shift of, oh, I've got to, get on the train or get in my car or whatever, it's like, I'm going to go like feed myself spiritually, there's just no replacement for the live experience for sure. And what's so cool about, the kinds of performances that we're talking about, I assume, is that we're not talking about stadiums. We're talking about generally, moderately intimate performances. So I hate going to see musicians in stadiums because I'm like, I might as well watch this on YouTube. I can't like feel any of their energy. It's just too dispersed. Maybe for the group experience, but I love the more intimate concerts where you really feel like you're part of the performer's like performance, because I know that when I'm on the stage in an intimate space, I feel the other people in the room, and I react to, and it's such a weird thing. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like you can feel if they're not into it, you can feel if they're into it, and both of the, and all a myriad of other things, and all of that is great information for you because you can adjust or you can create your own vibe, and so it's a very, we all need to be better about doing live performances and going to them for sure. And I think it is a mindset shift.
But again, just like I said that I love to work with composers multiple times.
Mhm.
Now I'm starting to really like working with other types of artists multiple times. And I don't mean the chamber musician, I mean the poet,
Yeah.
the dancer, that sort of thing, because now you're changing your perception of that particular piece. So I'm going to mention Megan Flynn, who performed with me a couple months ago, and we did glass together, plus some Philip Glass etudes. But she also had done a piece with Bingen, a recording of Bingen coming out. I said, well, we're going to have to do this. And if she did this live, and with me playing live, it is a completely different experience. And especially when you think about how a lot of when you mix these genres, you have one thing that's fixed. So you might have a dancer performing with a recording, but when they're actually performing with a live musician, what that chamber music is like. And it's really spectacular. And that also goes into, now I'm getting on my tangent, with the audience. Like you said, you're trying to pick up their energy and you're changing it a little. And something like Tony's pieces, whether it is the Van Halen, where I play an accent a little different way, or the Gygax, where I kind of get in a certain zone so they think about Dungeons and Dragons, or I think about Hildegard and how they're working with it. But I think even something like Jackson Pollock, which we hadn't talked about, which I guess I'll quick flip to that. So on the recording, there was a pre-recorded part of, it's me, but it's the background, so it's the canvas, and then there's another part. In a live performance, that's done with looper pedal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when I can play that opening section with looper pedal, I really love it, because then there is that chamber music element where, okay, now I can do this. So it's a lot more improvisatory than it may sound on a recording. And that's why you want to see it live. And you want to see that metronome live.
But I mean, and that's a whole other, my metaphors are terrible. Ball of wax, can of beans. No, I don't want those metaphors. Some other better metaphor. But that's an interesting experience to play with a looper pedal, because you're essentially temporarily fixing a performance of yours in time, and then you're locked into that for the live performance. How does that, to me, it's a little intimidating sometimes to do that kind of performance, but are you just like, I love it, or how does that feel for you?
Well, I'm doing more of it now, so I'm becoming a little bit more comfortable. I prefer the looper pedal to the CD.
Oh yeah.
The playback, because I really can play with it.
Yeah.
And I know when I'm in the same mood when I do the recording of the looper pedal as I am when I'm performing the other part. I guess that's it. I'm kind of like, I want a little bit more space here, or maybe I feel like moving this forward, or here's my phrasing, and then I start thinking, okay, this is what I just did, and I get a kick out of that. Right. But the CD playback also has an interesting element, and also it makes it easier to play it in a variety of venues. You don't always have what you need to play a looper pedal,
right?
Various things, right? And the CD playback is easier. But I like the fact that Tony was flexible enough to do it in a couple of different ways. And I also like that he wanted to stretch things.
Right.
And you can actually tell that from his very first, I'm sorry, I'm laughing at it, because I can just imagine Tony in his early 20s. So remember, this first thing was before he even met me, and the homage to Kurosawa was the first one he did, and he did it for a theory assignment. And the theory assignment was you have to do something in 12 tone, and so he made it as tonal as possible. And he won, and I can't remember how much he won. I think like $25 or something like that. But
great.
he won it. Kafka. From Kafka and Pain Theory.
Oh.
Yeah, he was the one, his theory professor.
Oh, wow.
So this, like, all
geez.
music geeks know.
Yeah.
And then that's how this started. It was a theory assignment, for goodness sake, and then this becomes this project.
Right. Oh, wow, for Casca. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
I'm sorry for the non-theory geeks. I'm sorry that it's cool.
Yeah, maybe I'll have on the show page. I have a little note. Casca Pain is the OG. I learned from Casca Pain. Okay, I'm gonna go back to process.
I know. I'm sorry. I took you.
No. I love where you took me. That was great. I'm low key getting like free piano lessons right now. So I'm like, what else can I ask Holly?
That's awesome.
And just tell me, Meg, I don't want to talk about that. If you're like, this is boring.
No, I love process.
Because I switched. Part of the reason I switched to organ was the memorization was tricky for me, and I will say I never gave it. The old college try. I was just like, I don't want to memorize. My piano teacher kind of wanted to get rid of me. She was very sweet, but she was like, you need to play organ, and I'm like, oh, I think you're right. And it was great. I loved it. But what I really struggled with was my relationship with the piece when I was looking at the notation. When you take that away, then the relationship changes. And it's a very cool relationship change when you take the notation away and you're not looking at every single note. But I guess for me, I never quite mastered that switch. It was like the separation anxiety from the notation and learning how to relate to the piece without the notation and, obviously remember it without the notation. Like, how does that work for you? I mean, you've been doing this for so long, and I'm sure you, as a child, you were doing it. And I was self-taught, so I was always reading notation because no one was forcing me to memorize it. But is that something you'd be interested in talking about?
Yes, but I'm going to have to talk about it in a couple different ways.
Okay. All right. Cool.
So this is a loaded question that everybody is grappling with on some level.
Yeah.
And I read well, and I find that when I am reading, I could easily go someplace else. My mind could go someplace else. And my fingers are there. So I'm not really as connected, which is why I want to play from memory. But yes, there is that terror of if I'm going to forget this, or what if I get distracted? And especially now, it is worse now. And I thought for a while, maybe it's my age, but it's not the age, it's the time, it's the era. It makes it harder for us because we're constantly thinking about, I can do this quickly, and memorization takes time.
Yeah.
Memorization takes a lot of time. So I think about it in a couple of different ways. One, when I am going through it, it seems really nice, and you're in Technicolor when you're reading it because you feel comfortable and you're like, okay, this is fine. I see it. I have all these safety nets. And then when you start to memorize, you go through a dark tunnel.
Yes. That's a really good visualization for it.
And depending on how difficult the piece is, that's how long the tunnel is. And it's going to take how long it takes.
Right.
But then when you get out, it's really Technicolor. The most brilliant and beautiful thing when you can play from memory and you realize that you can now adapt to your phrases and you can adapt to your audience, and you can really be that conduit from the composer to the audience in a way that you can't do with the score. Now, yes, you can do it with the score. Yes, that's possible. And yes, all your senses are activated, but it's not the same. But you have to accept the fact that you're going to go through this tunnel every time. It's not easy. So when I memorize, I actually memorize as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some really geeky ways that I memorize, but they're very tried and true. I mean, I really do this. And my husband wrote this piece Kierkegaard wrote this piece called Prayer Stones because I have all these prayer stones on my piano. And those are what I use for memorization.
Oh.
So I literally, like how some people will take paper clips or pennies or something like that. I have these inspirational prayer stones that they practice or a triumph or I don't know,
Right.
all these different things or a piece, whatever I look at. And I use that for repetition. So when I am going through a page or a passage, I actually write S if I've done it 20 times from memory. And if I've done that 20 times from memory, that's just that day. So
Right.
I actually write all the way through so that there is enough time for the memorization. And I might do one page or another page or put them together or like make that a bridge, but that becomes active enough for my brain so that I'm not relying just on muscle memory.
Right.
So knowing that it's muscle memory, knowing that I'm understanding the blueprint of it, knowing that I can play it by ear, knowing that I can sing it, like all these different aspects of it. Now I'm really getting to know the piece. And when you are doing some things that are more complicated in the 20th or the 21st century, you do have to approach it differently. And maybe you say, okay, I'm doing this 13 times. Like the homage to Gary Gygax, here's this 13 section, here's this 8 section, and you have to memorize the sequence. But you do feel much better at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when I was younger, I relied on muscle memory. Everybody does that when they're younger. That's why little kids, you're like, how can they memorize it? 'Cause it's all muscle memory, and they have no fear.
Right.
It's like whatever.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah,
That's
they're not. It's no job or anything invested in this.
But it's fantastic when you can take all of this, and it's actually shocking to a lot of composers that are writing today when they see that you're playing their music from memory.
Really?
Yes. Like a lot of them, well, they don't expect it, and they're moved. They're like, you memorized my score? I'm like, well, I memorized Beethoven's score. I memorized Chopin's score. You know? I'm like, did you memorize mine? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm connected to the score, then I want to do that. And if I want to do multiple performances, then I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But as scary as it is to play from memory, it's also scary for me when my foot pedal on my iPad doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know? There are certain elements that are terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, pick your terror.
Yeah. I know.
Are you more afraid of technology or are you more afraid of,
Right.
stopping or whatever?
Yeah, having to fake it a little bit for a while. Okay, so first of all, thank you. Second of all, I'm just like mesmerized listening to you talking about this. Is so cool. And I thank you because I've never heard it put quite that way, that it's a dark tunnel that you just have to get through, and it's going to take what it takes, as long as it takes. It's a really great visualization for a lot of the creative process. There's like especially when you're first starting something, whether you're creating something or working on something for the first time, there might be that initial like rush of like, this is exciting. And then you hit the like technical part of it. And you're like, I'm never going to get out of this technical part. And it's never going to feel good again. And it's so hard. And then, you get out of that. And then you're like, okay, now I've got the technical and the rush. And it's amazing. And, it feels great. So I love that framing of it. That's really great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not sure you're going to want to use this, but because I'm just a teacher, I feel like I have to tell you a couple other things.
Yes, please. Please.
A couple other tricks, please. So, first of all, remember that your learning of music is one set of skills, but your performing is a completely different set.
Right.
So, performing from memory, you just have to find friends. You have to do something. You can record by recording yourself on your iPhone. You can put up a stuffed animal so that you have somebody looking at you. You can do it for your mom. You can do it for your friends. You can do all those things. But that skill is different from you learning the notes.
Right.
So sometimes when people are practicing, they say, okay, well, I just need to know my piece better. Sometimes you have to go out, and you're going to hear this cliche anytime. You have to perform before you're ready.
Yeah.
But that's that bridge. You go from this point of, I know the piece the best that I can. It's maybe it's 90%.
Yeah.
Start performing it, because you still have to get to that 90% of the performance. And that takes a while. And that's harder when you're older, because you don't have a studio class, you don't have a support network, you don't have a bunch of students learning with you.
Yeah.
But you have to find it. Tony gave me a little, I don't know what it's called. It's kind of like a bobblehead, but it doesn't bobble, of Eddie Van Halen. And I've shown the picture on my Instagram page.
Oh, yeah.
But Eddie is on top of my piano, and I play for Eddie when it's my first memorization time. Like, he is my audience, because I know what I want from that.
Yeah.
I want to play with the fearlessness of Eddie Van Halen, and he's looking at me with this cute little face,
Mhm.
and I'm like, okay, let me do that. So it's really helpful. So I think that when you can do even just that short section or something else, then you can make that work. The other thing that I wanted to tell you, because I feel like this might be helpful, is that when you're talking about the technique, remember that when you are nervous, your body shrinks.
Right.
So when you are practicing something that's either a jump, that's usually where you're going to have your memory slip. If you have muscle memory only.
Right.
Because you're like, why did I miss that note? I've never missed that note. I don't know what comes next.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
But if you know I'm going to the C rather than I'm feeling this distance, then if you shrink, you still know that you're going to the C.
Right. I would so love to see you do some of teaching through your social media and have these videos where you give these tips and stuff, because I think you have so much to offer. And I think that would be really, especially for young pianists, that would be so appreciated, because it can be a very scary road at first, So that's my unsolicited suggestion.
No, I love that. I love that. Thank you. Well, I'll say one other thing, because I think this is a more interesting way of considering memorization. And you had already talked about images when you asked an earlier question.
Yeah.
There isn't one single way to play something from memory. You don't have an absolute process. I mean, some people do before they start to play. And actually, I have a student that I should mention, because I think of him every single time I've gone out since I've started teaching him, where he takes his time. I mean, he takes, I don't know, so much more time than anybody else. And he adjusts his glasses, he adjusts the bench, he does it again, he has all this, and it's like nobody is pushing him.
Mm-hmm.
He will play when he's ready to play. And meanwhile, I'm like, I'm on the bench for 1 second. Okay, I'm going.
Right.
This is it. I gotta go now. But sometimes you have a particular passage that if you can think, oh, I remember how this feels in my body here.
Mm-hmm.
Or like when I'm thinking right now, I'm facing you and I'm getting ready to play Van Halen. And I'm noticing that the curve of my fingers at the very beginning is this. And now there's a comfort in that. It's not what notes am I playing.
Right.
And yes, I know what the sound is, and yes, I know what the character is, but I also know, okay, it's this. And I know that my whole torso is moving so that I can move in front of my body on the keyboard. And now that whole physical experience, like I'm doing a yoga routine almost.
Right.
It's very calming. And so sometimes you have a different energy depending on the piece. And you've mentioned this about my playing, I guess, where you imagine that I use my entire body. And I love that you said that, because yes, that's how I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where am I on the keyboard? How am I facing this? How am I sitting? What is the sound? How much weight? Is it a fast attack? Is it a slow attack? And you put that character in, and then here I am at the piano, and I know you can't see me, but here I am, and it's like it's just right above the keys. That's all you need for the piano, but the rest is for the audience. Well, depending on my audience, depending how deep it goes, depending on how much you think they need. Okay, well, now there's other spaces that I can use.
Yeah.
And so then that can be incorporated early in the practice and early in the memorization, because now you can say, all right, now I need to have this. And now this becomes a lot less terrifying than what notes went on.
yeah, the first thing that struck me as you were talking about that is because you were talking about how you worked with dancers, and it's like you have your own choreography at the piano,
Yes.
it's or you're blocking if you want to speak of it as an actor, it's like, oh yeah, this part requires this gesture, or I'm most comfortable in this body position doing this, and for this part I'm in a different body position, and so that makes sense. Yeah, from how I hear you're playing, that you are thinking of it as the 3D space. It's not just like a head thing, it's a full body thing, and you're really thinking 3D, like where am I in the space? Approaching the piano that way, I think is, yeah, I love that another hot tip from Holly.
Well, I think the album definitely works as a collection, and that just has to be, I guess, a little bit of me, but Tony, because in my mind I hear three compositional styles. He has three different books of homages, and I can tell the difference between book one, book two, book three.
Oh, okay. All right.
So Tony made the order for this album, and I like that he made the order, and I didn't have to make the order.
Yes.
But he definitely wanted a very specific narrative, but that's all mixed in. So it's definitely not chronological, and I'm glad it isn't. But he wanted to have one sound go into the next. So book two is when I came in. So then that's when you have the Van Halen, you have Pollock, Miyazaki, Dolan. Like that's book two. And then book three, Gygax. Gygax sounds very different to me than Van Halen. And Frank Zappa sounds very different to me, Kurosawa, than Van Halen. So I see that. I see those different versions. But I think what ties it all together for me is that as humans, we have to keep learning. Now, this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, especially this day and age. But I don't want to be the smartest and the most talented person in the room. I want to have at least 5 people in any place who I can talk to, who I want to collaborate with, who can teach me something, where I'm interested, where it's something I've never heard of before. I don't want to be the one talking.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I'm doing this interview right now, I want to learn from other people, because what's life for?
Yeah.
And so I think when you're younger, you keep trying to think, oh, how can I be at that very top? And then you realize it's a lot more fun to learn from other people. And I guess when I hit a certain age, I already said I'm Gen X, so
Yeah.
But when I started to accept the fact that I could learn from people 20 years younger than me, and 30 years younger than me, I was like, okay, now this is fun. So now I feel like I have friendships of people that are decades younger and decades older. And I can have my walking buddy who ran marathons, who's 80 years old, and she gives me tips on like preparing for a marathon. Nice. I mean, that's the sort of thing where I want to constantly be challenged. And I think that's why that the current recital series idea is so important to me, because if I don't keep learning, then I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Early.
Yeah.
But Tony's homages, how can you not keep learning?
Right.
Every single aspect. It's like, okay, well, here's this painter, and then here's this this physicist, and all these, and here's an electric guitarist, which actually it makes sense that Tony would show me the first piece, since he plays electric guitar.
Okay.
Then this is a Van Halen.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I can even show like that slight little bit of swagger is he says, is this possible on piano? And I said, yeah. I said, can I play it faster than you, Mark? And the joy that I had to ask that question, because, how many times do we look at that metronome marking and going, oh my God, I'm never going to get there.
Right.
I'm never going to get there.
Right. But that is such a Van Halen thing to say is, can I play it faster? That's awesome. And I love Van Halen because I so admire Eddie Van Halen. He was just such a prodigy on the guitar and so amazing, so creative. So, but I like, for me, it's also as a pianist or organist, they can be very isolating instruments. In a true collaboration, you're learning from each other, and that's definitely something I'm learning to value. Yeah, that alchemy or that magic that happens when you're working with another artist who's on the same wavelength as you, and you're like, I never thought of it that way. I never would have thought of it that way, and it's just so cool that we are here together thinking of it that way. So yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
And I think this is also interesting because we do connect to those composers, their work, even if they're deceased. And I mean, I think as a pianist, we're used to trying to interpret Chopin a certain way or Beethoven a certain way. And even though we have in our mind here our favorite Chopin pianist or our favorite Beethoven pianist, we do try to find something else, it's communicating with us. But it's the same thing with a living composer. I kind of laugh at some of the composers when they say, well, why aren't you asking me about my music? And I'm like, I can figure that out on my own. Tell me about you. And then I can start to piece some other things together. And luckily, the composers that work with me are very open to what I am seeing. And there isn't, oh my gosh, so not what I had in mind. More often than not, composers will tell me, this is what I had in my head. I'm like, great, then I have interpreted your, I hate to say this out loud, psyche, as well as your emotional state, your mental state, your intellect. There are lots of pieces to them.
Thank you, Holly, for being on the podcast. And everyone listening, please go find Hommage and listen to it. I'll include a link on the show page. It's really a very cool collection of different types of pieces, all beautifully performed by Holly.